This episode of Twin Cities Trekkies is brought to you by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor before, let me explain. First of all, it's free. There are creation tools that help you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership required. They'll also help you to distribute your podcast so it can be heard on many different platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's all you need in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to episode 6 of Twin Cities Trekkies. I am Wes.
And I'm Kenzie.
And today, this episode is going to be talking about, maybe it'll be a shorter episode. I don't know how it's going to go, but we're going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation. We're not talking about the show or anything like that. We're going to talk about a video game aptly titled Star Trek The Next Generation. It was made in 1994 I know the publication date was 1994 for both the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. So I know we're gonna talk about our how we feel about it, and I'm actually the one who's actually played both versions. So
Yep.
And they're a little bit different from one another, but we definitely could talk about that. So to get in touch with us, email us tctrekkiespodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram. TC Trekkies Pod is the handle for both of them. And we're available on many different platforms like TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, because we're part of Anchor.fm. So definitely. So I guess we should get into it, I guess. So this video game, right now, 2021, we kind of briefly talked about this in episode 4, which was about fandom culture. We briefly
Yep.
talked about it, and that's why I wanted to talk about this and a little bit more in depth, a little bit, because how we feel about that kind of thing. So, I think I should start with how I found out about this game, and then stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, it's funny, because I was in the '90s. I'm a video game nerd too, as well as every other. Like, I'm a retro game nerd. I'm freely
Absolutely
admit that.
love older
Retro.
games.
Yeah, I love older games.
It's more my thing.
Yeah, so I think I rented this game once when I was a kid. And I had the Super Nintendo. I was the Nintendo person. I was a Nintendo person because back in the '90s it was Nintendo versus Sega. So and I had friends who had Sega and I had friends who had Super Nintendo. So, but I had the Super Nintendo. So I
Yeah.
picked up this game once and I played Star Trek The Next Generation, which is called Star Trek The Next Generation Futures Past. Yep.
And then in Sega Genesis, isn't it Echoes Past?
Echoes from the Past. Yes.
Echoes of the Past.
Yeah, Echoes from the Past or Echoes of the Past, I think. But so I rented this game once. It's published by Spectrum Holobyte, who actually, and what's funny about it is actually they were the first. I follow like video game YouTubers, and there's one by the name of the Gaming Historian. When he did one about Tetris, Spectrum Holobyte was the one who published Tetris on the PC back in the late '80s. So there was like a little bit of history of Spectrum Holobyte. They're the ones who brought Tetris to the United States. So originally.
Yeah.
So it's based on the Next Generation. It came out, I think, shortly after the show ended. and it was like kind of like so it's kind of like a game where you command the crew of the Enterprise, doing all these missions, that kind of thing.
And it's sort of there's a few different versions of the gameplay too that you can play
Yeah.
because you can like do your little away mission where you're controlling, like giving that RPG feel where you are controlling a little group of crew members, or you could be the captain on or like being on the bridge and like working that way. So it's
Yeah.
kind of an interesting takeaway of like gameplay for a game that's based on a show.
Yeah. And so my initial kid memories of it were like, this game's horrible. It is. It's very difficult.
Well, the
It,
Super
it,
Nintendo one I know starts off a little differently than
the
the
Sega
Genesis
Genesis.
one. That's what I've like heard. So my great grandma had both, but I never. She had a Sega Genesis and we never did. But my great grandma gave me the Super Nintendo game to play, and I still have it to this day. Like most of my Super Nintendo games are from her, and my dad played in front of me, and in college my friends and I would play a bunch just because of the storyline of just being like, "Ooh, next generation, love it, like let's go through it, like true role playing here, like
Hmm.
definitely story heavy."
Yeah, story heavy and puzzle heavy.
Yep.
So definitely with those, with definitely both versions. Um, but and then I mean, I remember renting it, returning it, thinking, I think I wasted a little bit of my life there.
Yeah.
Because it was because I know I was like probably like 7 years old when I first played it. So I played the game. I didn't get very far, obviously, but it's because it gets really hard really quick. So it just felt like this was like a waste of my time. So didn't think much of it, as like I played it on for time or time. I actually owned it a few times, before
Hmm.
getting rid of it a few times.
Yeah.
So
I never like fully made it through the game, but I just loved all the away mission stuff because it
mm,
actually was more strategic around you could choose anyone, even like the bigger characters. But it
mm,
became this thing of like you better choose minor characters because if you lose too many of your like main characters, like
like,
senior officers and stuff, or like Picard, the game's over, like if they die. So it's like, well, I'm gonna choose a lot of red shirts, like
yeah,
or basically a bunch of ensigns and let them like junior officers.
yeah. So yeah, definitely that. So yeah, like I said, but then the I mean, you get into fights with you get into starship combat with Romulans, and if you happen to
Oh,
run
space
into,
combat.
yeah, the space combat part of it is kind of a little bit awkward.
Oh yeah, the
Because
controls
it's
in
like,
both in these games are kind of wild.
yeah, it is really weird, and
You
I
kind of like
just,
slide, like moving your ship around the like.
yeah,
It's almost like I mean, you're kind of like yeah, like careening and sliding around the screen, and it's like, how do I stop it? Like it's like maybe
yeah,
this is how it goes. Maybe they're really trying to make you feel like what it feels like to have a bunch of like dampeners and thrusters and like how long it takes to slow down. But oh man, it's hard when you're sitting there on a tiny controller trying to
mhm,
do this and you're like spinning out and trying to move around
yeah,
swiveling
yeah,
everywhere.
yeah. So it feels like when you're playing on the Super Nintendo version, it's like you you're firing your phasers and photon torpedoes, and you're turning around, and it's like the Enterprise runs around, like goes around, like turns so slowly that it's like you're trying to hit the wall, not trying to hit the wall in like a racetrack.
Yeah.
So, but so that's pretty much that that game. I don't get very far in the game. I mean, I
Yeah.
own it right now, and I actually have it on my. I actually have a physical Super Nintendo, and I
Yep.
have a SNES Classic. I actually have that game on the both physical version and on the SNES Classic.
Yeah.
So, I do have that, but yeah, so it's really interesting. It's actually a one coherent storyline, but
Yep.
since we don't get very far, it's like, I mean, at least for me, um, it's very hard. I know it's about this one device that this one
Yep.
scientist has discovered, and trying to like figure out what to do with it, that kind of thing. And I think it's called
I
the
also
inner.
loved that the computer actually had like a giant database that you could read about stars in the area and all this stuff. Like I
Mhm.
loved that because when stuff would take a long time, when you'd be doing like repairs and it's taking forever and like there's not really much you can do, you could just like go and read like information on the ship's computer. And I always
Mhm.
thought that was super cool. I'm like, wow, there's so much information about like classes of stars and like star
Mhm.
system classes, and you can read about what exists there. And I'm like, actually, this is kind of neat. Like that they put a lot of thought into like actually putting like canon historia into video games, like
Yeah.
computer. Like, I'm gonna read about this star that we're going to, like, and just like sit here for a little while and read.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, and they actually have in the computer system, they actually have the history, a little bit of history of the crew and a little bit of the previous enterprises. So that's always nice about that. At least and but the one thing I really do not like, and I freely admit it, is that you're on the bridge. The only music you hear the entire time is the TNG theme.
Yep.
It's on a continuous loop, and it can be annoying after a while.
Yeah. Old
Wh-
video games, especially on the Super Nintendo, had a really bad habit of filling all voids with noise. Like we're used to in like a lot of newer games, there's like ambient background noise.
yeah,
Like things like where it's not silent, but there's probably like birds chirping or machines whirring in the background. You would
yeah.
expect it to just be like they could have just taken like a little track from the show of just like little computer beeping noises and buttons
Or,
being clicked and
yeah,
like
like
that.
the
It's just like
or
or the
like
occasional door opening sound. Like it could have
yeah.
been anything, but it's just one of those things. Like especially in Super Nintendo games and NES games are even worse. Like just this repeating, looping sound.
Hmm.
Like there's a game that I would laugh at a lot, like on the NES called Deadly Towers,
Oh, I've heard
and
of that. Yeah.
that game is so annoying because the moment you walk into another room, it just starts again. But the thing is, the rooms are so small that you only get a snippet of the song before walking in, and you hear that same snippet of the song again. And it's just like, I'm going to stay in this room for a little bit so I can just get through the sound so I don't have to like constantly hear this repetitive, like, 8-bit music playing. I mean, like, oh God, this is going to haunt my dreams now.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the game's okay. I mean, now, I think it's okay now. But like, I want to talk about, if it's okay with you, Kenzie. I want to talk about the Sega Genesis version,
Yeah.
Echoes of the Past. Um, Came out at the same time, and the gameplay is a little bit different.
As with most Sega Genesis stuff.
Yes,
Nintendo and
unfortunately.
Sega tended to both do that, and there were always like subtle differences between both games.
Yep, there
Some
is
for the better, some for the worse for each console, depending on which game it is. But
for
I guess
for this
I
ver
wasn't sure what the difference was.
yeah, for this game it was a little different. Um,
Would you say
in
it
the
was better or worse?
I think for one thing, it is a good thing actually. In the Super Nintendo version, if you are confronted and the red alert sounds klaxons go on, you immediately go into combat. There is no chance to negotiate to get out of it. In the Sega Genesis version, you are confronted, but then you actually have dialogue choices.
Yeah,
It could and you read I mean, there's no voice acting at all, but you read the text and you're thinking in your head, okay, how would Picard actually say this? And
yeah,
and it's like if you say it wrong, you think in your head and you see the dialogue choices and you hear it in his voice. That's creepy. You hear it in Patrick Stewart's voice, and they go like, uh, and you do the right thing, you'll get out of it. But if you don't, you're firing your weapons.
yeah,
So, but most of the time you can't get out of it in that version. You can get you can get a conflict with, because the Romulans are one of the biggest villains in that game. But there's also a specifically created race too, I think. But Hey, specific, never seen it ever in Star Trek, but I think that's what it was. Chodak, I think that's called. But but definitely you can get out of it with that thing, and then yeah, it's just. I mean, the Sega Genesis version actually is a little bit better. I played it. I actually think it's
Yeah.
a little bit better. Just a little bit better, but not by much.
It's like,
So
yeah, it's one of those hard things, and it really comes down to the person playing and what they decide. Because I've heard that some people like the Super Nintendo version more than the Genesis version, but I can't really speak to that because I haven't played the Genesis version. However, like it's still one of those things that just comes down to like who's saying it and why they're saying it, because there's
yeah,
definitely different contexts on how that's taken.
yeah, exactly. It's all a perception. So I really don't have much to say other than that regarding those games. Because but I do remember playing it once actually at my actually a family friend's house once. The Genesis version. We rented it for actually from their video store and we actually played it and it's just I thought it was better, but but it's just like it's
There's
interesting.
also, it's funny how much nostalgia plays into how much you like a game though too, and the
Yes.
experience around playing that. Because there was a game I was really obsessed with as a kid, called Black and White on the computer, and I absolutely loved that game and thought it was so cool to be like kind of doing this real time strategy, like city building, like community building situation, like just playing this really awesome game. And as a young kid watching my dad play it, I loved it. And you're kind of the hand of God, and you can either go good or bad, similar to like Knights of the Old Republic, like gameplay of like choosing your path and what you end up becoming. But I had received it as a gift from somebody in college after I had not played it since I was a kid, and boy was that game not up to the expectations that I thought. I'm like, oh, this is a bit clunky and definitely dated. Did not age well. But
Yeah.
like games like where I have really positive memories of playing them, it's like, all right, I guess I'm gonna revisit this and see if it actually lives up to the expectations still, because nostalgia might be tricking me a little bit here by biasing how I feel about this. So, but I with the next generation game, I played it when I was a kid, and appreciated it because I'd seen it was kind of cool. One of the first games I've really seen where these characters that I've been watching on TV are really well pixelated and portrayed in that game, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Like I'm really excited. But like replaying it as an adult, like you could definitely feel like the clunkiness of controls and everything. But I still love it as a game because I'm definitely more of like a free roaming game, like open world, and it teeters on the edge of that because you can travel anywhere and do stuff and just kind of hang out and bide your time. But like it definitely has its pros and its cons. Like you're gonna spend most of your time playing like on away missions or doing space combat, but it is fun to just go and like read like information about the ship and about the area, about the characters, and the dialogue is on par with the characters and how they would be discussing things. So despite not having voice acting, I prefer it that way, just to read it and be like, huh, cool. Like it's
Yeah.
a text RPG.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah. And it's not a bad game. It's not a bad game. It could be better. I mean, granted, it could have been better, but
And also
I
hindsight's 2022 though, because I'm like, sitting here looking back on it, it's like, oh, it could have been better, but I'm like, for the time, it was pretty good.
yeah, yeah, because it was there was I think it was like you know they had these two games and also they had the PC game, a Final Unity that came out about a year later and that actually had voice acting from the from the next generation cast um and it had all of them but it had
Yeah.
all the characters and it was a more I mean I never played a Final Unity um I think I wish it was available somewhere I can watch I've seen videos of it, don't get me wrong, I have seen gameplay videos of that and I'm going like, oh, okay, this is a cool game. Why didn't I play this when I was a kid? Uh,
Yeah.
uh, because I thought this is actually better than I was playing before. But that's okay though. It's perfectly fine. And if it's okay with you, Kenzie, I kind of want to bring up another SNES video game based on Star Trek, if that's okay.
Yeah.
um, did you ever play Star Trek Deep Space Nine Crossroads of Time?
No, I'm not.
No. Oh, okay. Yeah, so if you ever get a hands on it, it's I think it I mean it's set during the first season of DS9, but and it was, everything was made prior to everything was coded, everything was made prior to this, like all the characterizations and stuff like that, the characters of Odo and Cisco and
Yeah.
Kira, they're all based on the first season, how they were acted and stuff like that. So and stuff like that. So if you ever get your hands on it, Kenzie, it's a decent game. It's kind of like really, really, it's okay. It's kind of like a little bit clunky compared, like I mean, it's a little bit better compared to the next generation video game. But this one was published by Playmates, actually, who actually created all those toys that we all
Yeah.
enjoyed, and it was published by them actually. So they published a few other games too, but this is the one I remember playing.
I
This
haven't
is
really like delved into a lot of Star Trek games themselves besides like
yeah,
just hearing about them.
I did a lot of the when I was a kid. It was like if everything was like Star Trek listed on there, I would pick it up and rent it. Like there's only like three games for the Super Nintendo that were based upon Star Trek.
Yeah.
The next generation game, which we have talked most about this episode, DS9 Crossroads of Time. If you ever get your hands on it, it's actually, I think it's pretty cheap to get.
Yeah.
It's pretty decent game. And stuff like that. And then there was one based on the original series movie era, um, Star Trek, Starfleet Academy, Starship Bridge Simulator. So
I was just thinking about I remember there was like a Star Trek Voyager like arcade machine because it was at a movie theater
yes,
here in the area. It was up in like Blaine or something. But I remember going to a movie theater where they had it and it was Voyager because I remember Seven of Nine being on the side of it and you like go and sit inside to play. I
yep,
was thinking about that. I'm like, I swear I played something that was related to Voyager, like a
mm-hmm,
shooter arcade
yeah,
game. And then I remember that, but it was broken and you couldn't shoot anything. And so you just like, and I just ended up like dying. It was like the Borg walking around. It's like, you got to shoot them. And then but it
yeah,
just didn't work. But I'm trying to remember there was totally a movie theater in the area. If anyone remembers it, let me know. But I swear I remember some movie theater that I went to here in Minnesota that had that. And I thought it was so cool because I'm like, hey, that's kind of wild. I don't see a lot of Star Trek merch around Voyagers much. Like
no,
I've been on the hunt for a Voyager shirt and I actually found a thrifted 10th anniversary Star Trek Voyager shirt that I'm planning to get at some point. But it's so rare. Most merchandise, most video games, things like that have been centered around the original series or like next generation. So
yep, definitely,
or it's
yeah,
really generically like open worlding, like not focusing on a specific series, but like starships or just the historian canon of the Star Trek universe.
speaking of like like you said, open world kind of gaming, you enjoy doing that. Have you ever played Star Trek Online?
I've tried it but I never really got into it because I don't play on computers very often and I'm like, well, never mind.
Yeah, I mean, I got into it a few times. I played it on my PC once. I was okay, but then when it became available for Xbox One and PS4, I ended up downloading it. And I played it for about a number. I've actually played it for about a year and a half. But
Yeah.
I
Because
mean,
then that the height of MMOs, well, coming off the height of MMOs, I
yeah,
guess,
like
but
Star Wars Galaxies and stuff like
yeah.
that. So yeah, I mean, it was okay. It's an okay game. I did like some of the expansions they did. When it came to console, like before I got rid of it off my PS4, there was an expansion set in the era of Star Trek Discovery. in which you can play some of their like you can be a crew member on one of that era starship. There was
Yeah.
also an era set in the original series, and there's also and I think there was one set in the Mirror Universe, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But everything was set. I mean, that was pretty ambitious of Cryptic Studios, who published Star Trek
Yeah.
Online, to set the show 30 years after Nemesis, in which everything has gone to hell.
Yeah.
Pretty much, the galaxy's gone to hell. I mean, they included the Romulan supernova, and that was part of canon. They brought that in there, and that was, but it's after. I mean, it's kind of interesting, Are we eventually? I mean, speaking of like the aesthetic about Star Trek Online with the Enterprise F and those kind of ships, are we eventually going to get there
Yeah.
when we watch Star Trek Picard? Because it's like because Picard sets in the year before, like 10 years before Star Trek Online, on the if they ever consider it canon, but it's like meta canon or beta canon. But but if they ever were to include the aesthetics from Star Trek Online, will we eventually get there when Picard um continues or is on its way to its end?
Yeah.
So I've always thought that, when Picard was first announced, I'm going like, this is cool. And I
Yeah.
thought and I thought and I thought the ships, the ships of the Federation in the final episode of the first season were going to be like the ones from Star Trek Online. No, it was a copy and paste fleet. Uh, I
Yeah.
know, I know, I know. I hear a lot of criticisms about that, and it was all the same ship, and it was all cut and paste. I mean, from what I understand, the VFX artists were had that done that scene about 2 weeks before the episode aired. So
Yeah.
they were kind of on a time crunch. I understand that. So I mean, I've seen a different video of that same scene with like the ships that we've seen in the original, like the Next Generation era. But but they didn't look like the ones from Star Trek Online, which was okay. But is it going to be, if we're going to get to Star Trek Online aesthetics um of what the ships look like, are they going to look like that? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I was a Star Trek video gamer, Kenzie. I will freely admit that. I mean, I played more PC games than I did console games when I was a kid. I mean, I played games like Star Trek Armada and Star Trek Armada 2 and Elite Force, which is another Voyager game.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fun game. It was a fun game. I have it on my PS2 actually, as a PS2 version. Which is okay. It's a decent version, but I played that game a lot and stuff like that, and I was like that. Whenever I saw anything with Star Trek on it, I would want it
Yeah.
for gaming. It's like, and I own all three of those games I mentioned for the Super
Hmm.
Nintendo for Star Trek. Um, but that Starship Bridge Simulator game, that was a decent game, and it's set during the Starfleet Academy during the era of the original series movies, and it's decent. It's better than the PC game based on Starfleet Academy.
Yeah.
Much better, uh, in my opinion. But it's okay. But and I liked Starfleet Command. That's a good what do they call it? Like a naval combat game, kind of like um it's kind of like the other ones I played like that for Star Trek Legacy. I remember playing that game. Oh, I will tell you a story about that. When I was when this was like 2006. So so I won an Xbox
Oh,
because of
nice.
Star Trek, and I have an Xbox 360 now. But when it was 2006, Xbox 360 was just about a year old. Um, and I remember wanting an Xbox 360 because of Star Trek, because there was going to be a Star Trek game made for the 360 called Star Trek
Yeah.
Legacy. Uh,
I really wanted to play that, but my dad and I never got it because wasn't didn't Bethesda make that too?
yes, they did.
Yeah, which is so wild to me. Like,
Yeah, Bethesda made 4 games over the course of its time with the license. They made Legacy, Tactical Assault for the for the DS and the PSP, um, Encounters for PS2, which by the way is actually really good. Um, and they made Star Trek Conquest, which by the way, if you ever get your hands on that one, Kenzie, it's on PS2 and on Wii. If you ever get your hands on that game is phenomenal.
Oh,
It's like a turn-based strategy game, kind of like um I would say Star Trek Conquest is like Risk, but in the Star Trek universe.
like Civilization.
Yeah, kind of like that. Sid Meier's Civilization, a little bit like that, but it's more like Risk. And I have played that game on and off since I've had it for like 10 years. I played it on and off on my PS2. I love it.
Yeah, I feel like I could appreciate a game like that. Like
Yeah, Star Trek. Yeah.
I didn't touch a lot of Star Trek stuff because most of my gaming was around just playing Nintendo series games,
Mm-hmm.
playing those, and I focused a lot on that. But I love any sort of like turn-based games, especially if they're like themed to a certain thing.
Yeah,
Star
that's a
Trek
turn-based
universe.
game. So
Yeah.
it's a turn-based game. I love Star Trek Conquest. I think that was the best title that other than Legacy that Bethesda made
Yeah.
because I've had all 4 of their games. Not a big fan of Tactical Assault. I thought it was okay. Kind of reminded me of Starfleet Command, which was good because they're the ones who the publishers who created it did work on Starfleet Command. But I mean, I have Legacy. I enjoy it. When it was announced that all 5 Star Trek captains were gonna do voice acting, I thought, I
Yeah.
gotta get it now.
I remember hearing about that and it was so exciting. It's like, wow, all of them working on the same project, and that's so cool. But I don't know, it was just one of those things where I'd heard a lot of people say really mixed reviews about it, and I didn't give it a chance because I was just like, eh. I'm like, I'm just gonna stick to playing like Metroid or Mario
Or
based games or Legend of
yeah,
Zelda and
I
call it
understand.
good.
Yeah, I completely understand that. And it was, I mean, it's a decent game for the 360. I mean, I have it now. It's decent. I mean, it's kind of cool hearing like the captains. Unfortunately, some of their lines are phoned in. Um, Especially unfortunately Kate Mulgrew.
Yeah.
In that game, because it sounds like they were just like they were on a phone and
Yep.
said it, which happened a few times actually during the making of the animated show. So of the animated series back in the
Hmm.
70s, William Shatner was touring on a play at the time. So he would have to record his lines like not with the cat with his castmates, but then they had to send it to California to get dubbed into the episode. So that's like some of the lines are phoned in, which is okay. Encounters is pretty good. It's like an arcade shoot 'em up kind of game. Uh, it was fun, but Conquest, definitely get your hands on it. It's phenomenal. It's like a turn-based real-time strategy game. I enjoy it. So, but that's I think I know the topic was supposed to be about the
Oh,
TNG
that's okay.
SNES
I think
game.
in
Yeah,
general, like just talking about the video games of Star Trek is
yeah,
cool. Like
that's a
expand that a bit.
yeah, it's cool. Yeah, because I know that it's just one game, but we expanded it to the. It just happens to talk about the entire Trek based video games, and I know that we've missed a few that are generally received as good. Like I can mention them right now. I actually own a few of them,
Yeah.
a couple of them. They're based on the original series, 25th anniversary, and Judgment Rights, and they're pretty good. It's point and click adventure. Has the voice cast, all of the original cast actually, because they were made in the early '90s after the 6th movie was out, and it's actually the last recorded lines of DeForest Kelly and James Doohan as Scotty and McCoy, and
Yeah.
so last recorded lines ever, I think. I mean, and it's really. I mean, when I play those games now, and I hear um, DeForest Kelly's voice. I'm going like, man, do I miss that guy? Uh, but it's really good. They're cheap to get. I heard on GOG.com. By the way, GOG.com does not sponsor us. Uh, so I'm just doing like a free little freebie. It's like $10. It's not bad. It's not a bad download price. And then it's like it's available. I think there's only like 4 Star Trek games on there. The first Starfleet Command game, Judgment Rights, 25th anniversary, and Starfleet Academy. Those were like early '90s, early to late '90s Trek
Yeah.
PC games. So but it's free to. I mean, it's $10 to download each one. It's the full game, and it's really good. I mean, I enjoy playing those games, and it's okay. I mean, I'm not a big fan of point click adventure, but they are fun. They are fun.
Yeah.
And they're generally regarded as the first classic Star Trek games. And I know we've missed a few, so
Yeah, I would like to hear what games. Do you have any favorite Star Trek games? And if so, and we, let us know. I want to hear more. I need to up my PC gaming library
yeah,
because all I have is the next generation game on the Super Nintendo. So it'd be cool to hear about anyone's favorite games personally for Star Trek.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, like I said, shoot us an email, comment on our posts, and definitely. So I guess until next time, take care and live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper, Pete.